Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome to Government Contracting Weekly. I'm Jim McCarthy, the owner of Key Solutions and the host of this show. All of us in the government contracting community recognize that the past few years have been remarkable both for their challenges and their uncertainties. As a result, many of us have focused our efforts on simply maintaining our business market position. Well, today we're going to go on the offense, and I'm joined by a group of experts who will probe with me not only maintaining our place in the market, but rather growing our revenue and our share. Helping me this morning are Morris DeFeo, a partner with the law firm of Crowell Moring. Morris, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Also, welcome back, because you've been on the show before, yeah. And then we have Kellye Jennings. She is a partner with the firm of BDO. Good morning, Kellye.
Good morning.
Good morning, and welcome to our show. And finally, we're joined by Greg McCaffrey, the Senior Vice President for Delta Research Associates, And welcome to our show, Greg.
Good morning, thank you.
Okay, well, I know our audience is quite keen on this topic, so we're going to start and get right into it. So the first question I have for you, Morris, is what we just talked about. So there's been a shift in government contracting, I guess, over the last couple of years, and companies are looking for new growth opportunities. What are some of the strategies that are being employed?
There is a time where I think companies have begun to realize that they really can't simply pursue old solutions, and they have to start thinking more creatively about growing. And there are a number of different ways to achieve that kind of growth, whether you add additional products or services to your mix, or you look for new markets, or you acquire an existing business in an attempt to expand. We're seeing activity pick up in all of that, both domestically and internationally. And there are challenges to each, but there are opportunities that are out there. If
every challenge has an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Kellye, what strategies are you seeing from your standpoint?
Something I see quite often is the joint venture strategy, teaming, specifically creating joint ventures between generally a larger company and a smaller company. As you know, the government still is required to spend a certain amount of money on set-asides and with small business minorities. And such. Therefore, a lot of the big companies are interested in getting their piece of that pie, and definitely want to team with some smaller companies and try to get some of that work done. On the flip side, the smaller companies sometimes need the capabilities and the resources that the larger companies bring. So that type of arrangement really does benefit both companies.
Okay, well, good. Greg, post-sequestration, what strategies are you seeing?
Well, I echo what Kellye has stated. The last couple of years have been very, very difficult for contractors, government contractors. It forces contractors to rethink their business strategy, and they may include examining client types, solutions. It also may force contractors to think about new markets in terms of areas such as healthcare, cybersecurity, international. Another aspect that I have seen, or a demonstration of focus, has been in the back office. And what I mean by that is a focus in terms of how a company defines success. Success from a business development standpoint. And that also includes the type of tools that are used to track opportunities, evaluate opportunities, the amount of investment that's deemed as appropriate for pursuit. Those are some major changes. And again, the last couple of years have forced contractors to think about, I think, reality in some ways.
Right. So we've, there's teaming, there's subcontracting, there's joint ventures, there's LLCs that are formed, there's mentor-proteges. What are some of the criteria that companies should use when evaluating which of those models will help them to expand?
Well, I'm a big advocate of knowing yourself before you do anything else. It never ceases to amaze me when companies embark on a strategy just because they've heard somebody else has done it or they think it's a great idea. You have to know your resources, you have to know your strengths and weaknesses, you have to know your risk tolerance. So Kellye, for example, is talking about joint ventures. A lot of clients think joint ventures are an easy solution, sort of a first step to an acquisition. I really don't want to do an acquisition, I'll do something simple like a joint venture. That usually is a red flag that they haven't really thought through the process, because joint ventures can be very, very complex. And if you don't really understand the resources that you have, for example, going internationally, as Greg was saying, if you go internationally, you have to have resources that are dedicated to pursuing that. So what I find very often is the first step is to ensure that the strategic objectives are in alignment with the legal resources and objectives and the whole kind of mindset and philosophy of the company.
Right. Kellye, my question for you would be, when it comes to the criteria, what's foremost in your mind or your client's mind that they should be considering before they take these actions?
Along with what was just said, I do agree that knowing yourself is important, but I think really the important thing is to keep the long-term strategy of the company in mind. Really the owners, the shareholders, anyone that's got a stake in the company, we need to kind of make sure that whatever their long-term objectives are executed through whatever growth plan is in place for the next 5 or 10 years for a company.
So in your company, when you're considering different things to do, what are the criteria that you're using to make, to choose among various models?
Well, I concur with the other participants. That you need to have a strategy in place. Know thyself. It is surprising when you speak to different contractors, and they may include team members, when you're asking what their core values are and their core capabilities, the answers are somewhat befuddled or muddled in answer. So you need to know what you want to do in the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years out. That serves as your skeleton for your strategy. You can then determine tactical plans to go pursue individual contract types, teaming arrangements, as we discussed. Just because another company was successful in a certain area, that isn't necessarily a map for you as a company or a company owner.
Right. I suspected if it were easy, everybody would be doing it.
Right.
So there must be some pitfalls and some problems associated with this, or at least red flags or challenges. And we're going to take a break now, but when we come back, I'd really like to get into those challenges and pitfalls and red flags, okay?
So did we win that government contract?
We did.
And?
And now we've got to deal with the regulatory hurdles.
Well, good luck with that.
When the government's your client, you need to play by their rules.
Ah, and the rules change more than you think.
Exactly. We need someone who's done this before. Plus, it's complicated, so we're going with BDO.
BDO.
People who know government contracting know BDO.
AFCEA has been bringing government and industry together since 1946. By joining AFCEA, you'll reach the decision makers and become part of the discussion. You'll increase market visibility, gain market insight, receive discounts on AFCEA member services and events, and manage and engage corporate associates. AFCEA is the association of choice. Join today at www.afcea.org.
Questions. Do you lack win strategy, themes, and discriminators? Are you being outmaneuvered by your competition? Did you get a late start on your proposal? If you answered yes to one or more of these nightmare scenarios, we can help. Hi, I'm Jim McCarthy, owner of Key Solutions. We help government contractors win government contracts. And for over 30 years, KSI has helped clients win or retain over $130 billion in government contracts by providing the keys to winning. We assist companies both large and small to enter the U.S. government contracts market or to increase their market shares. We have worked with 87 of the top 100 government contractors and literally hundreds of small businesses. So if you're chasing a must-win contract opportunity, go to our website, aockeysolutions.com, and click on Win. It's a tough market out there. Don't go it alone. We've been talking about some business strategies that might be used in a new environment. So if it were easy, as I said before, everybody would be doing it, right? So, Kellye, what are some of the pitfalls or red flags or challenges that are associated with this?
Something I see quite often is the excitement after the M&A transaction happens. So what I see is two companies that are talking, they finally are able to work out terms, the deal closes, and then there's not a lot of thought brought to what happens next. The integration after the merger doesn't
post-closure,
doesn't happen so easily, and sometimes it creates big problems for both companies.
How long does a typical honeymoon last, by the way, between two companies?
About 10 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Being generous.
Once the check clears.
I got you. Okay, Greg, what were your thoughts?
Building upon that thought, you see an exit of key personnel. I'll use it as a case in point. I had a company that was purchased several years ago, and I called back a year ago and found out none of my old staff were there.
They're all gone.
Later, all gone.
And
with that, you lose the client contact in some cases. You lose the history associated with winning and pursuing awards, and you may lose industry presence as a consequence of that.
Okay. All right, well, let's shift gears just slightly and look at international markets. Many government contractors are in their quest for new business or beginning to look at the international market. So what's that all about? What are you seeing in that area?
Well, I think it's a natural outgrowth of reduced government spending, whether it's in the U.S., whether it's sequestration related or just otherwise. And I think a lot of companies that historically may not have considered the importance of looking internationally are now doing so. It used to be that the international was sort of for the big boys, you know, the bulge bracket contractors, and now the small, medium-sized enterprises are becoming more and more active.
Is it an act of desperation on their part, or
Sometimes.
is it planned?
And well, it depends. I mean, hopefully it's planned, and if things that are usually born of desperation don't tend to go very well, and things that are born of planning do. Yeah. So I think that you're seeing a lot of the smaller companies, for example, they're looking for market share, and they're looking for access into certain particular targeted markets. I spend a lot of time with clients in the Middle East, and a lot of companies are embarking on those kinds of initiatives.
Okay, so Kellye, let me ask you this. Okay, you're sitting with a client, they're trying to decide whether they want to go international. What do you tell them? What criteria do you suggest that they use?
Well, I think the important thing is to do your market research. You need to figure out what it is your company does, whether it's on the product side, the service side, or both. Does that really convert to something that can be done internationally? There's a lot of issues that go not only from a distance standpoint, but also regulations, cultures, things, and you really just need to understand the environment.
It's not always transferable.
Not always.
The culture here in the U.S. may be totally different. Is that what we're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There may be inconsistent legal standards too that make it impossible for them to do what they want to do in these jurisdictions.
Right. Okay, so Greg, let me ask you perhaps the thought about the critical first steps. Okay, let's assume that the decision's been made. We want to go global. We want to put our foot in the water and test it out. So what steps should you begin with?
Well, my first question is always why? If you're an established U.S. government contractor performing a reasonable amount of work in the United States, why and how do you want to go overseas? Now, if you look at contractors, and they'll say our client's taking us, and that may be largely true. If your federal client takes you internationally to do support work, that's one way of doing it. So we'll see contractors that will do for many, many years perform international work, and all they'll do is interact with that U.S. government client, and that's fine. Maybe after the contract ends, they depart. So their strategy was go win some business, perform great quality service for the federal client, and when the contract's done, we're done. Other companies have used that as leapfrogs as a way to get into a market. The U.S. government contract will allow an entity to go into an international market, gauge a situation, determine teaming, subcontracting, and opportunities for growth.
Okay, so it sounds good. There's a new market. We could try it. There's some pitfalls like you mentioned. What are the challenges that are faced when a company decides to go forward into the new market? Help us with that.
Well, there are a couple of practical challenges. One is that there is a qualitative difference between doing something internationally and doing something domestically. If you're a U.S. company going into the Middle East or India, Brazil, it's a lot harder than you think. And one of the things that companies always do wrong, I think, initially, sort of going back to what the panelists were saying, is that they don't dedicate the resources internally to focus on the international market. It's not just grab somebody who's used to selling things in Duluth and saying you're now selling things in Dubai. It doesn't quite work out that way. Beyond that, what ends up happening is that you don't have, if you're a company that has not had a history of doing work internationally, more likely than not, you do not have the infrastructure and the compliance regime to deal with international things. And if you step into a problem internationally, to use an old military expression, you can be deep in the hurt locker.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, well, we're going to break and step away for a commercial, and when we come back, I'd like to get into the subject of joint ventures and strategic alliances. We'll be right back.
AOC, Key Solutions, and the Government Technology and Services Coalition are pleased to announce that BAE Systems Electronic Systems Sector, a global company engaged in the development, delivery, and support of advanced defense, security, and aerospace systems, is a 2014 Mentor of the Year award winner. Nominated by Cristec Interconnects Incorporated, BAE Systems Electronic Systems Sector has contributed significantly to Cristec's growth through technical support to transfer technology to Cristec for a new product capability, moving Cristec from a component-level manufacturer to a critical subcontractor, and by supporting the development of EVMS and CAS systems within Cristec. On behalf of the Government Technology and Services Coalition and AOC Key Solutions, congratulations to BAE Systems Electronic Systems Sector.
Since 1941, the USO has been lifting the spirits of America's troops and their families. Members of our military continue to make sacrifices and defend our nation. That's why the USO of Metropolitan Washington, Baltimore is committed to serving them throughout their years of service. USO Metro is the way for you to say thanks to our local military members, their families, and our wounded warriors and caregivers. Please visit us at usometro.org.
Greg, earlier in the show we were talking about joint ventures and other strategic alliances. What considerations should a company at least take into account when considering doing those things?
Well, that's a major consideration for an established government contractor. If I'm a U.S. government contractor, I'm used to some predictability from the federal acquisition regulation in terms of how rules and processes are done here in the United States. When you cross the border and go overseas, things may be very different. For example, in terms of enforcement, if you've got an issue with a joint venture partner, an international joint venture partner, how do you establish game rules? How do you determine what your rights really are? If you have a problem, what's your recourse? So there's some fundamental questions that have open-ended answers, and I would say, not out of jest, is as a contractor, find a very good attorney and accountant, an international attorney and accountant.
Like these folks.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm not overstating. I haven't been down that path myself.
Yeah. Okay, so Kellye, from your view, what are some of the problems with joint ventures and teaming arrangements and things?
So back to the international context, one thing that we really haven't touched on is asset protection, whether it be technical assets, technological assets, or people assets. When you're dealing with a company overseas, you might need them as a venture partner because of their establishment within a jurisdiction where you want to do business. That you don't have the same set of rules that you have in the United States. So you might be sending technology over there and you don't know where it's going. And that's a very real problem for a lot of companies
so
that need
IP
to protect.
issues and
Absolutely,
stuff? Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so that part of stems from the model that we're talking about. What do you see as the problems, Morris, with joint ventures and teaming agreements and subcontracts?
Joint ventures, regardless of whether they're domestic or international, but I would agree with Greg that international raise additional issues, are complex transactions. And if a client goes into it thinking that they're really a simple, again, wading into a deal, it's usually not the right thing. Very often, a lot will turn on control. And people, like including lawyers, will think of control in a very technical way. What are my covenants? What are my rights and like? But the control issues that are most vexing are the ones that are occurring or not occurring in practice. So even if you have robust controls as majority directors or whatever, it doesn't really matter unless you have somebody who's watching the operation. And so if you've got a compliance regime in the US, for example, and you're trying to roll out a joint venture in another country with a different history of compliance or different culture of compliance, watching your internal control environment and your compliance environment can be very, very complicated.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe our viewing audience is sitting here saying, well, okay, there's pros and cons of all these steps. What about a hybrid method of maybe part of the company's working on commercial and part of it's doing government, whether it be international or national? What's wrong with that approach? I mean, so what?
It's a great approach if you can do it the right way.
That's right.
It sounds great. You have the best of both worlds, government and commercial. But there's really some internal problems that are created by trying to do that. One of which is human capital. Selling and doing work for the federal government is a very different process than selling and doing work commercially. And so trying to manage that dichotomy within an organization is very hard to do.
So even that strategy has pitfalls?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, listen, we're about out of time for today, and we're going to go to commercial break. And when we come back, I'd like to ask each of you your final thoughts, and then we're also going to hear from Dr. Richard Nathan, who's going to talk to us about the subject of basically proposal themes and strategies. Okay?
In this hyper-competitive marketplace, as a federal government contractor, now more than ever, you need to identify, track, forecast, and analyze opportunities that will help you grow your company by better positioning yourself to win contracts. I'm Jamie Bratton, the founder of Easy GovOps, and that's our mission. Utilizing the most intuitive market intelligence platform, Easy GovOps, enables contractors of all sizes to manage their pipeline, collaborate, and team like never before. Experience for yourself the power available to you and your team with a 5-day free trial period with no commitment necessary to begin. Simply visit easygovops.com to start your free trial today. Join the hundreds of other federal government contractors who are enjoying the ultimate competitive advantage of our unequaled market intelligence. Just spend one free week at easygovops.com and see for yourself.
As you've seen from watching our show, we've begun to produce and air commercials. For advertisers, this is smart for a couple of reasons. First, there's no waste. Our audience is almost entirely contracting executives and procurement officers. Second, we include commercial production, and with KSI's $130 billion in wins, we know how to create the most impactful message. To learn more, contact us at governmentcontractingweekly.com and click on Advertise.
The Veteran Institute for Procurement was established to arm our vets to win in the federal marketplace. VIP is a comprehensive educational training program for veteran-owned businesses, and it's working as graduates add jobs and grow revenue. The program is funded entirely by the Montgomery County Chamber Community Foundation and is offered entirely at no cost to participants. To learn more, please visit our website at nationalvip.org.
We're back. We're here to talk about your last thoughts, your final sort of takeaway for our audience. So what would be yours, Morris?
There are a number of different strategies or paths to growth, and there are advantages, disadvantages to whether they're mergers and acquisitions or joint ventures. And the most important thing that I would say to a client is, as early as possible, get your team together, clarify your business objectives, and work through the resources that you're going to need to actually execute on any one of the alternatives that you select to move forward on.
I gotcha, okay. What would be your last thought, your one word?
My one word is really opportunity cost. Basically, there are a number of strategies that are available to a lot of different companies, and really I think it's important to understand what you're giving up by taking one strategy over another, and just making sure that you're making the right decision from an opportunity cost standpoint, because really everybody's here to maximize the return to the investors and the stakeholders of a company.
Okay. Greg, your final takeaway.
My thought would be from an operational standpoint. As a U.S. government contractor, when you go international, you're dealing with a variety of issues you may not be dealing here, cultural, financial, political, otherwise. So do not underestimate the level of effort and the cost associated with doing so.
Yes, and I think that's an important consideration. Go into it with your eyes open, in other words.
Correct.
Absolutely. And get the right kind of help, I think, is also part of it, right? Okay, well, we're about out of time for today, and right now we're going to go to my colleague, Dr. Richard Nathan, and he's going to talk about the vexing strategies associated with proposal themes. So we'll get into that in just a minute.
Good morning. A viewer recently asked about themes, what they are and how many to have. Now, I'm not going to answer that question, but it gives me a chance to go on one of my favorite rants. I've lost count of the times that I go into a company to help on a proposal, and the first thing they want to do is come up with themes. Unfortunately, they think they can create themes before doing any real capture or strategic work. And what they come up with is more a description of what they want to sell than what the customer wants to buy. I know I'm not talking to you when I explain this, but it's important for the others to hear it and to understand. Imagine you just walked into a car dealer and a salesman walks up. In their stand-up meeting just before this dealership opened, the sales manager told all the salesmen that they had a great new shade of red car coming in and that they, the salesmen, should talk up red cars. So when the salesman walks up to you, the first 4 sentences out of his mouth were reasons why you should buy a red car. Those were his themes of the day. But there was no way in the world you were going to buy a red car. They're just too flashy, and you're really a conservative guy. You're more into white cars or black cars, which, by the way, are the 2 most popular colors this year for cars. So his themes were useless, and you tuned out and turned around and walked out. His themes did not resonate with your wants and your biases. Themes need to reflect your differentiators, aligned with what the government wants to buy. So themes should be one of the last things you create after doing your capture work, creating your solutions, and fully developing your win strategy. Themes are the few major messages that you want to repeat in your proposal, perhaps in different words each time, that remind the government why your company or team is special and will give them what they want. Spoiler alert. Although all companies think they're special, most are not. For the most part, you're all selling the same thing. And that's why the packaging, the strategy, the offer design, the proposal are so important. So back to themes. There should not be many of them because your company probably isn't special in more than a very few ways, if at all. But this specialness must be related to what the government is looking for, what they're wanting to buy, or it's not really relevant. If you were selling red cars to the government and they really had no preference about the color of the cars they were buying, a theme that your red cars were better would be wasted words. So it all goes back to knowing the government's needs, wants, and biases. Develop a strategy to meet them, which hopefully gives you something to brag about. This offer design leads to discriminators, and the discriminators give you your themes. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but not much. At AOC Key Solutions, we're all about helping you retain or win your next contract. If you have a question, please visit us at governmentcontractingweekly.com and click on Inquiries at the top of the page.
I hope that this morning's discussion provided you with some concrete concepts that you and your colleagues can put into action. To paraphrase an old saying, that the best defense is a good offense, and I suspect that's just as true in business as it is in sports. So I want to thank our panel for taking time from their busy schedules to join us today. First off, we have Greg McCaffrey, the Senior Vice President of Delta Research Associates. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
And next we have Kellye Jennings, a partner with the firm of BDO. Thank you, Kellye.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Morris DeFeo, a partner with law firm of Crowell Moring. Thank you for coming back a second time.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
But most importantly, I would like to thank you, our viewers, for once again making Government Contracting Weekly a regular part of your learning regimen. Now, on behalf of all my colleagues at Key Solutions, I'm Jim McCarthy, and I'll see you next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.